So Jack's been here with us before. Thank you for coming back again.
Times, yeah.
So we talked about compliance, talked about security, safety, privacy, and of course that old kind of chestnut that is called the IP. And Jack knows all about IP, and he tells us all about it. Is that right, Jack?
Yes, thank you very much. Great to be back here at Giant again, and see the room so busy late in the afternoon on the second day. So yes, my name's Jack Severs. I'm a UK and European patent attorney at GJE. I lead our digital health group, so specialise in advising health tech companies of all sizes on how to use the IP system to protect and scale their innovation. So I'm going to be talking about digital health, particularly innovation in digital health. I'm going to talk about some of the challenges faced when trying to protect digital health inventions, but hopefully the key point I want to get across is that with the right steps, it is possible to overcome those challenges and obtain broad protection for digital health inventions. So, digital innovation in healthcare. Innovation is something that's quite difficult to quantify, but one measure is the number of patent applications being filed in a particular area. So the chart on the left shows the number of patents filed last year at the European Patent Office. And as you'll see, the top three sectors were digital communications, medical technology, and computer technology. And it's really the intersection of these three areas where we're seeing the greatest innovation. The graph on the right, it's a bit more specific. It shows patent applications filed over the last few years applying AI in health tech. And as you might expect from some of the talks we've heard, the numbers of patent applications have really taken off in the last 5 to 10 years. And you can see some of the key application areas there. So diagnosis, simulation, as I'm going to be talking about later, smart devices, therapy-related inventions, processing medical images. So that's kind of a broad snapshot, an overview of the kind of state of play with digital innovation in healthcare. But I thought this year it might be useful to kind of bring out a couple of specific examples. So I had a chat with a couple of clients last week and asked if I could present on their technologies and explain how they're using the IP system to protect their technologies. So first client I wanted to talk about briefly is Novoic. So they are using machine learning to learn representations of speech which are predictive of cognitive conditions. So essentially, they have developed bespoke machine learning models that allow you to encode both the linguistic and non-linguistic portions of speech in a way that's predictive of a number of conditions, and they're particularly focusing on Alzheimer's initially. So there's one product called Storyteller, which looks at assessing a patient's recollection of a story that's told to them. And by using state-of-the-art AI-based speech biomarkers, they can detect patients much earlier and with much higher confidence. They also have a number of tools about automating the administration and rating of these clinical assessments. So they're essentially identified an issue in that there's just not enough people to administer these clinical assessments, and so with their software, this can be scaled. The second example is Oxford Heartbeat. So Oxford Heartbeat are developing software to aid surgical decision making. So their precise neurovascular software essentially simulates the deployment of stents and other implantable devices, allowing surgeons to try out different models of stents, different sizes, to select the best fitting device that will give the best performance. So it involves importing patient scans to get the patient's vascular kind of structure. You can then select the optimal positioning of these devices and rehearse alternative scenarios. And the studies based on their software have shown that you can get much improved results by using this software to make these decisions ahead of surgery. So two really interesting applications and examples of digital innovation there. But why have these companies come to us? Why is IP important to health tech startups? This is one example that I like to use. It's from a report from economists at the European Patent Office that essentially surveyed a large number of SMEs across Europe. They looked at their performance in terms of their growth in revenue. They looked at their use of the IP system. And what they found was that those companies making use of the IP system were much more likely to be these high growth companies. But perhaps more interestingly, they also found that it's those companies using the full suite of IP rights, so who really had a coherent IP strategy that effect was most pronounced for. So they were much more likely to be these high growth companies. And of course, that is you need to be using the IP system to achieve growth and then ultimately scale your technologies. So we've looked at some interesting examples of digital innovation there. We've looked at one example of why IP is important. So what are the key considerations for health tech companies looking to use the IP system? These are some of the questions we get asked most frequently. Like any tech-driven company, a key question is whether you can patent your digital innovation. There's lots of misconceptions out there about the patentability of software. It is now pretty routine to patent software inventions, but there are particular restrictions out there you need to be aware of. The second question is not one that gets asked so much, but it's one that I think should be looked at more, which is whether patent protection is actually the right option for digital innovations. With software inventions, they differ from hardware products in that there's likely to be features that could be kept confidential. Obviously, patent applications get published, so is it the right option to go down the patent route and disclose those details of the technology? The final question we get asked a lot is about how to consider freedom to operate, so how to consider the risk from third-party IP rights. So taking those each briefly in turn, can I patent my software implemented innovation? Well, there are challenges presented by the patent system to protecting digital innovations in health tech in particular. There's an exclusion in most patent systems to patenting methods of diagnosis and methods of treatment by surgery and therapy. And so there are some software methods, it's a bit of a grey area whether they fall within this exclusion. There's also the restrictions on patenting certain types of software inventions and the restrictions on patenting mathematical methods. So you can't obtain a patent for a pure algorithm, a pure mathematical method. And that's obviously, relates to AI, which are, at their heart, mathematical methods. So the key point I want to get across is that it is possible to navigate these challenges, but it's crucial to frame the invention correctly from the start when drafting the patent application. It's also quite frustrating sometimes when trying to explain to an audience, what falls within the patent eligibility criteria, what's not patent eligible. Because it's so software, it's so example dependent, it's changing the whole time. There are a lot of grey areas. But these are useful indicators, I think. So if you've developed bespoke software rather than kind of putting together off-the-shelf components, particularly if your software interfaces with hardware, so controls any hardware or receives data from hardware such as sensors, if there's some kind of real-world output at the end of your software, so an example would be a diagnosis or a health condition prediction. So the Patent Office looked pretty favourably on the application of digital innovation to providing a diagnosis. Are you applying machine learning to process user or patient data to provide an output? So if you answer yes to any of these questions, that's a good indication that there's at least a possibility of obtaining patent protection. Okay, so the second question that doesn't get looked at quite so much, perhaps because it's not always in a patent attorney's interest to raise it. But I think it is important if you are developing digital innovations in health tech. There's lots of advantages of patent protection. The main one being the main function of a patent, which is to provide up to a 20-year monopoly in which you control use of your invention. And from that, these other advantages run. So it's a barrier to entry for competitors, potential additional revenue through licensing the patents. It can assist with funding applications, commercial negotiations. But as I say, if your innovation is not something that is forward-facing, if it's at the back end, a key point is that patent protection will require disclosure of those features. So it's important to weigh up these advantages with the fact that is there the possibility of instead taking a different route and keeping it confidential? Again, this really needs to be assessed on a kind of case-by-case basis, but some important questions to consider. If you were to patent the software, would you be able to infer whether a competitor is actually infringing the patent? Equally, if you were to release your product, would features of it be obvious to a competitor? Would they be able to infer them from your product to be able to copy it? What is the scope of protection obtainable? Obviously, if you can obtain a very broad patent, that's going to be much more easy to enforce, and so it might lead you towards patent protection. But I think the key consideration here, and certainly one that's relevant to the two clients I mentioned earlier, is whether you intend to publish results and details of your innovation in any case, because a lot of health tech companies will want to publish, demonstrate the efficacy of their solutions. So if you're publishing anyway, then the kind of negative impact that a patent application publishes is negated to some extent. So I think that's a particularly key consideration in this sector. Finally, FTO. So I think a lot of these questions come from the fact that often, grant applications will have a section for freedom to operate, which will essentially say, to what extent do you have freedom to operate? You'll get asked similar questions during IP due diligence if you're, going for investment. So often companies will come to us and say, how can we demonstrate this? And it's a bit of an unfair question because really you can never say with certainty that you have full freedom to operate. The picture's always changing, so you can never know with certainty. And actually, my advice for early stage companies is that these kind of full freedom to operate searches are likely not to be the best use of resources, and usually I suggest a more targeted approach, so looking at key competitors, being aware of the IP rights they have, set up watches on new patent applications being filed, and you can get a much more focused, targeted approach to managing freedom to operate risk, and still have a convincing answer to put in these grant applications and during IP due diligence. So just to return to these two clients, so Nevoic, this is technology that's particularly challenging. It falls close to a number of these restrictions. It's a method of diagnosis. It's kind of pure AI, but they've really built up a strong portfolio of patent applications over the last few years. They've managed to navigate those restrictions. They've got protection in place for a number of key elements here, and have had positive assessments from the European Patent Office, which is the most challenging jurisdiction to obtain protection in. So it does show that it is possible to navigate these challenges to obtain strong protection. Also, Oxford Heartbeat, again, challenging technology for the IP system, but they have a strong patent strategy in place, a number of applications filed. They've also benefited from recent case law, which has clarified that this type of simulation is patentable. There were kind of question marks over it before. So they've managed to use that, and when we prepared the patent applications for them, we could benefit from that to frame the invention strongly. So that's almost it. But for those of you that are considering what are the right steps in terms of ensuring your investment ready, the first step is always innovation capture. Have you gone through all aspects of your innovation to identify potentially patentable inventions? Other types of innovation, whether it's design, brand names. Have you got the ownership situation sorted? That is one of the areas that we often see issues arising later. Strategy, have you decided whether you're going down the patent route or know-how? Do you know where you're filing? How are you claiming the invention to provide the strongest protection? And the ongoing step of checking that your IP rights still map onto your products. The patent process is a long process. It can take 3 to 5 years on average to get a patent granted. So it's important to continuously look at your IP rights and check that they map onto your products. And finally, FTO, as I mentioned, having a plan, having a convincing answer to the questions on your freedom to operate situation. So that's pretty much it from me. We are, just to introduce us, we're GJE. We've got a booth here if you want to come and find us. Really proud to be listed #1 in the Financial Times listing of Europe's leading patent firms. As always with Giant, we're offering free IP consultations, so you should be able to scan yet another QR code there if you want to book, or come and find us at the booth later on. So thanks a lot.